sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Center's program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the CTOUR, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
La CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo del público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces, nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos, no podemos ser neutrales.
100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, The Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic.
We have three priorities: commitment to international law and legal security, as well as predictability and transparency in preparing our deliberations, including through focusing on the rules of procedure. And I'd like to also highlight the importance of human rights, particularly the right against racism and all forms of discrimination, and building synergy between the OAS and the Global Partnership Against Hunger and Poverty. Moving on to item 2. This is pursuant to the mandate established by Resolution 3028 of the GA, and we now will be addressing the issue conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity outside national jurisdiction and its link to the human right to a clean, healthy, sustainable environment. And to begin our conversations on this topic, I'd like to request the Secretary to project the video intervention of Dr. Javier Palomo, the Special Rapporteur on Economic, Social, Cultural, and Environmental Rights of the IACHR. Please go ahead, Secretary. Chair of the Permanent Council, Secretary General, dear members and observers, I'm honored to speak to all of you as the Special Rapporteur on Economic, Social, Cultural, and Environmental Rights from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to address the issue that is so crucial, that is conservation and the sustainable use of marine biodiversity outside of national jurisdictions and its link to human rights. The high seas represent about 42% of the Earth's surface and is key for our planet's life. And it is the source of a large part of our carbon and oxygen production, and yet less than 1% of these areas enjoy full protection. In the face of this situation, we recognize the need to fill that void when it comes to governance at the high seas. And so we have 80 countries that have signed the International Agreement on Conservation and the Sustainable Use of Marine Biodiversity in Zones Outside of National Jurisdictions in 2023. This is the first legally binding instrument designed specifically to protect biodiversity at high seas pursuant to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Sea, or the Law of the Sea. The treaty has not yet entered into force, however, and it only has 60 ratifications. As of today, only 21 have done so, and 7 of them are countries in the Americas. 5 of them are from Caribbean states alone. Also, only 3 countries of the so-called developed countries have yet ratified this treaty, and that is Spain and France, which are active observer states at the OAS. And I'd like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude for their support. About a third of humanity lives near a coast, and millions of people, particularly in the global south, depend on the ocean for their food source, health, and culture. That includes indigenous populations, small-scale fishing communities, and small island developing states whose rights are intrinsically linked with the health of the ocean. States have a key complementary obligation, both when it comes to international environmental law as well as international human rights. These obligations mean that we have to protect and guarantee human rights in the face of damage to the marine environment, and that includes preventing and controlling while reducing pollution of the ocean, and that includes chemical and plastic pollution, including land sources, atmospheric and marine sources as well, to reduce the impact on the environment and employ the principle of precaution while also restoring damaged ecosystems. First of all, I would like to mention that when it comes to the universal system, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. This convention is very key. It establishes the general obligation to protect and preserve the marine environment, and this means that every state must control activities under its flag or jurisdiction in order to prevent pollution and deterioration of our oceans. Recently, the International Court on the Law of the Sea reiterated that this obligation includes global threats of climate change, and greenhouse gas emissions are one way of polluting the oceans, according to that tribunal, and we have an obligation to reduce them. The marine environment has degraded, and we must take measures to restore these affected ecosystems. This development of legal precedent reiterates the shared responsibility of states to protect our oceans beyond their national borders. In the inter-American realm, the intrinsic relationship between the environment and human rights has been firmly established by recognition of the right to a healthy environment in the San Salvador Protocol from 1988, as well as the interpretation of the Inter-American Convention on Human Rights, which the Inter-American Court of Human Rights has developed based on its consultative advisory opinion. According to that interpretation, the duty of states to guarantee and protect human rights when it comes to environmental damage is applicable to damage caused within their territory and those that go beyond their borders. That means that no state can deny their responsibility based on the idea that damage is occurring outside of their own jurisdiction. Quite the contrary. They must adopt cooperation measures and also precaution and protective measures to avoid ensuring that any activities under their control, such as industrial fishing, marine transport, or mining, has any significant damage to the marine ecosystem that we share and which sustain the rights of persons inside and outside states' territories. Having a human rights approach to our oceans allows us to launch inclusive policies that are equitable and contain a long-term approach. We must recognize the importance of traditional fishing and act as quickly as possible. We must promote effective participation of coastal communities and protect those who defend our ecosystems. The high seas is our shared resource, and conserving it is not an option. We must ensure that states protect our human rights, and protecting the high seas means protecting climate resilience, food security, health of countless communities. It's indispensable for preserving our natural legacy for future generations. And so we all shoulder a responsibility to act decisively with a view toward the future. Thank you very much for your commitment and for addressing this topic deeply in your working plan. Thank you very much. I would like to ask the Secretary to express our gratitude toward Dr. Palomo for his intervention. And now I'm pleased to give the floor to Ambassador Tomás Pascual, the Director of Human Rights from the Ministry of Foreign Relations in Chile. Ambassador Pascual, welcome, and I give you the floor. Thank you very much. Yes, please continue. greetings to all of the delegations present. Interpreters note the very poor sound quality. Interpreters are not able to hear well. We are doing our best, and please bear with us. Interpreters are unable to provide interpreting services. Due to the very poor sound quality, we're unable to hear, and therefore we cannot understand what's being said. This means that after 2 years of negotiation, as described by the rapporteur, countries have been able to establish an agreement on conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity beyond their national jurisdictions. And this is an international treaty that is iconic in this area, and it gives us the power of providing substantial means to states in order to shoulder their concrete specific obligations stemming from this treaty. And Dr. Palumo described the importance of this treaty and that over 90 countries have already signed it. It entered into force, and its demands and requirements have only been shouldered by 7 countries that have ratified it, and that includes Chile, which intends to host the Secretariat in Valparaiso in Chile. And for Chile, this is a particularly relevant treaty, not only because we are the secretary, but also today we are launching a very bold policy on biodiversity in protected areas. And it aims specifically to establish a domestic regulatory framework in order to provide the appropriate tools for protecting the environment, considering that this has a direct impact on the exercise and fulfillment of human rights obligations. And in this sense, I think it's worth noting that, first of all, we look at the interdependence between human rights and the oceans. There is a crucial role played by the oceans when it comes to our ecosystems, regulating the climate, ensuring food security, and the well-being of coastal communities. And climate change, biodiversity, and over-exploitation of marine resources have a direct impact and pose a threat to human rights. And this is included in the resolution that is going to be adopted tomorrow at the Human Rights Council on the right to a clean, healthy, sustainable environment. And regarding the oceans and human rights, this is a resolution that is directly in line with what we are addressing in today's forum. In the text, we are recognizing the interconnection between the human right to a clean, healthy, sustainable environment with obligations stemming from other international instruments, such as other treaties described by the rapporteur. And they also note the role of SDG number 14, number 6, that is clean water and sanitation. In addition to the special importance, this protection looks at the repercussions of deteriorating oceans on women, children, indigenous communities, coastal communities, SIDS, and less developed countries, all of which are very present in Latin America and the Caribbean. The text that I am describing also urges states to promote meaningful participation of these groups in designing and implementing, as well as the assessment of policies and projects with an impact on the marine environment. In that sense, as states, we have an obligation to take steps to advance the principle of precaution that allows us to protect these environments, strengthen environmental protection, and ensure access to justice, transparency, accountability in environmental issues, which is fully in line with the CASU agreement, which is a regional agreement aimed specifically at these issues. It's also important, in our view, to incorporate a gender perspective, inclusion, and collaboration with human rights defenders and civil society are also key. We also need to keep in mind international cooperation, the adoption of national frameworks for governance that ensure greater evidence is available. In that sense, with a view toward the future, it's important for us to promote cooperation between states and UN agencies in treaties as well as civil society organizations, particularly academia. We must drive the access to the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment that includes the ocean. And it is of great importance that we consider environmental degradation and the loss of biodiversity, which are often the result of gaps in existing regulations. And often this has disastrous effects when it comes to the quality of life of priority groups or groups who find themselves in particularly vulnerable situations. Add to that the impact of climate change and the non-sustainable use of resources, pollution of the air, and the direct impact that it has on the possibility of these rights being satisfied for future generations, as well as the transgenerational impact. So in that sense, it's in our great interest to address this topic with a focus on existing legal frameworks as well as domestic regulations which have been promoting the protection of biodiversity, and particularly an area which is not new, but perhaps in terms of international regulation is something that we haven't heard a lot before, but is particularly important, and that includes extractive industries such as mining and other similar mechanisms that may have an impact on the environment. And for our country, it's very important to include this topic in today's agenda. And we're willing to continue working together to address this in the future. We hope to see the Technical Secretariat in Valparaiso to address this topic at the universal level. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Ambassador Pascual, for your words. And now I'll give the floor to the delegations that would like to speak on this topic and the order of business. Thank you very much.
México tem a palavra.
Mexico, please. Ambassador. Thank you very much, Chair. Mexico would first of all like to congratulate you, and you can be certain that my delegation will broadly honor the great prestige of your foreign ministry as chair. Thank you very much to the presenters today, and thank you to Chile for your leadership in this important agenda. Since 1998, Mexico has recognized the right to an environment at the constitutional level with reforms to Articles 4 and 25 of our Constitution. In Mexico, we establish the right to an appropriate environment, and we include the principle of comprehensive sustainable development. In our legislation, we have established the link between human dignity and protection of natural rights. From our constitutional reform in human rights from 2011, the National Commission of Human Rights has driven an office responsible for defending economic, labor, and environmental rights at the national level. Mexico has broad relationships with the ocean, in the east with the Gulf of Mexico, and in the west with the Pacific Ocean. We are staunchly committed to preserving and caring for them both. My country ratified the Escazú Treaty in 2020. This expresses one of the highest commitments in environmental protection with sustainable development, the right to health and a healthy environment, as well as the right to access to information, participation, and justice in environmental matters. Additionally, it's a testimony to our bold vision, which characterizes the entire region of Latin America in this area. Mexico is an adherent of that. We express our deep respect to all states and urge them to ratify the Escazú Agreement and enrich its our national legislation with its content. With this approach, Mexico was an active participant in the negotiations of the treaty for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity in zones outside of national jurisdiction, also known as the Treaty of the High Seas. We focus on the environment and the need to protect and conserve ecosystems that may be at risk due to climate change and other human activities in international waters, such as maritime transit, marine and submarine activities, and overfishing. In November 2023, we supported the moratorium of submarine mining in areas outside of our national jurisdiction. As a member of the Council of the Marine Fund Authority, this reiterates our commitment to protecting this ecosystem. That decision is in line with the principle of precaution and in full respect of international law, defends that when there is a possibility of activities that involve overexploitation of submarine environments outside of national jurisdiction, we need to create mechanisms for supervision, inspection, and appropriate compliance with regulations. Current scientific knowledge has not given us a full picture of the real impact of overexploitation activity on the environment. Therefore, Mexico celebrates the commitment of members of the Council that have chosen to not support beginning extractive activities until we have more information. We also support the activity of the authority that is responsible for developing research prior to any activity that may pose a risk to biodiversity and the future of mankind. Chair, Mexico reiterates our commitment to all human rights, including the economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights under the principles of universality, indivisibility, interdependence, progressiveness, and non-regression. We recognize the work carried out by the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights through its special rapporteurship, as well as the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, in continuing to contribute to the implementation of the Inter-American jurisprudence in this area. Thank you very much, Chair.
Muchas gracias, embajadora.
Thank you, Ambassador. Uruguay is recognized. Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, we would like to thank you and congratulate the Brazilian chair. We wish you most success during your time at the helm of this council. And also thank you very much for the reports on economic, social, and environmental rights from the ICHR. Also, thank you to Ambassador Thomas Pascual from the Ministry of Foreign Relations of Chile. Thank you for your intervention. Uruguay particularly celebrates this event and special session. The presentations that we have just heard reveal one of the most crucial challenges of our time, that is conserving our natural resources, particularly biodiversity, in marine environments outside of national jurisdictions. For Uruguay, this conservation as well as the sustainability of our marine biodiversity are crucial not only in areas in our jurisdiction, but outside our national jurisdiction, as preserving the environment anywhere is in itself important, as damage in one area can affect another. We need clear rules to ensure that states opt for sustainable development, and therefore we actively participate in the negotiations that concluded in 2023 with the signing of the Framework Convention of the United Nations on the rights, the law of the sea, on the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity in marine areas inside and outside of national jurisdictions. This was signed by Uruguay in January 2024. Finally, I would like to reiterate our commitment to promoting sustainable development and strengthening human rights to a healthy clean and sustainable environment, and we will continue to move forward in policies that promote the well-being of our population, but also which preserve the environment for present and future generations. Once again, thank you very much to the special rapporteur, Ambassador Pascual. Your activities have inspired us to continue working hand in hand on behalf of all countries, particularly those that face the greatest challenges, in order to continue fulfilling the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you for your expressions to myself, Uruguay and Mexico. Now, Guatemala. Thank you very much, Chair. My delegation would like to greet you and congratulate you for assuming the chairmanship of this permanent council. Also, we thank you to Dr. Javier Palumo, the special rapporteur, and also Ambassador Thomas Pascual from the Ministry of Foreign Relations of Chile. Thank you very much for discussing this topic on the agenda. We fully agree with the importance of marine biodiversity for global balance and our well-being. The San Salvador Protocol was the first inter-American human rights instrument to recognize specifically the right to a healthy environment. It established the obligation of states to protect, conserve, and improve the environment for all. This right reminds us that preserving marine ecosystems is not only an environmental issue, it's a commitment to human dignity, food security, and sustainable development. In this context, it's imperative for governance of marine biodiversity to incorporate a human rights approach to promote active participation of indigenous populations and other relevant stakeholders who depend directly on marine resources, as they are the ones most affected by the health of our environment. With this in mind, Guatemala has implemented policies and concrete activities to safeguard our natural resources, to promote the well-being of our coastal communities and preserve our marine biodiversity. Chair, protecting biological biodiversity outside of our jurisdiction is central for the health of our ecosystems, and in that sense, we recognize and value the adoption of the agreement on the law of the sea regarding conservation and the sustainable use of marine biodiversity in zones outside of national jurisdictions, known as the BBNG. And this is historic for protecting and conserving the ocean outside of national jurisdiction. After almost 20 years of work, this agreement is a key step forward in international law and for protecting biodiversity in locations outside of national jurisdiction, while establishing a series of standards for activities related to biological resources in the high seas. It includes standards for the collection and use of marine genetic resources, digital sequencing, management, protective areas, mitigating the environmental impact, technical capacity building, and technological transfer, which is so important for protecting our oceans. That agreement is in line with the commitment to for the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity in Guatemala, has been making the steps necessary internally to ensure the third conference on this topic to be held in Nice, France. It's fundamental for developing states to have access to international cooperation mechanisms. This includes the creation of capacities and technological transfer in marine areas, and this itself will facilitate sustainable conservation of marine biodiversity, as well as allowing us to ensure that our decisions are based on the best available scientific evidence, ensuring that policies are effective, equitable, and respectful of human rights. To conclude, my delegation would like to thank you for including this topic at this forum, and we reiterate our commitment to the principles of international law, human rights, and its link to the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity. We reiterate that any initiative must respect the sovereignty of states on their resources and their territory where they exercise jurisdiction, as well as guaranteeing the UN Charter, the OAS Charter, and the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Thank you very much.
Embaixadora Panamá.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Panama has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to begin expressing my sincerest congratulations to you for being in the chair seat of the Permanent Council and to express our firm commitment to support and cooperate during this very important term. I would also like to recognize and thank the distinguished panelists for their participation. Dr. Javier Palumo, Special Rapporteur on Economic, Social, Cultural, and Environmental Rights of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, and Ambassador Thomas Pascual, Director of Human Rights Division of the Minister of Foreign Relations of Chile, whose presentations we have taken due note. Panama, as an inter-ocean country, has an historic, cultural, and economic relationship with the seas that surround us. Our geographic position is privileged and has made us a natural bridge between the oceans and the continents, but also is direct witness of the challenges that marine global biodiversity has in front of us, given the sustainability of marine biodiversity over and above national jurisdictions. In 2023, we had an historic hallmark. Panama supported decidedly the negotiations and is very proud to have been one of the first countries of our region to sign the agreement on the 23rd of October. This instrument fills in a critical gap in managing the oceans and provides specific tools for marine global conservation. Mr. Chairman, I would like to emphasize that protection of marine biodiversity is not just an environmental question, but rather is also an imperative of human rights. In 2021, the Council of Human Rights of the United Nations recognized the right of a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. That is a human right. And this historic declaration confirms what coastal regions have said and that is understood. Our supervision is part of this dignity, and this is intrinsically linked to the health of our oceans. In this regard, Panama reaffirms its firm commitment to protecting the environment, conserving oceans, and our legislation alongside the adoption of concrete decisions and measures has underscored the leadership of our country to promote sustainability of oceans, the preservation of marine coastal environments, and maritime governance in keeping with the objectives of sustainable development. The current generations have the right to a clean environment, and states have to act to protect this right. This includes guaranteeing that policies in protection of oceans consider the impact on health and well-being of communities. On the other hand, states have the responsibility to act to the benefit of future generations, ensuring that natural resources are preserved and genetic maritime resources that are in the seabed, both in national waters as well as international waters, are preserved as well. Once again, we reaffirm our conviction that challenges when it comes to protection of oceans are global and require the participation of the international community across the board. We are convinced that working together, we can build a future where protection of biodiversity and respect for human rights work hand in hand. And then finally, I would like to offer a clarion call to those who have not yet adhered to the agreement to make concerted efforts to rebalance our relationship with nature and safeguard half of the planet that is in international waters. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Costa Rica has the floor. Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Distinguished representatives, Permanent Representative, Secretary General, delegates, good morning to everybody. Allow me to begin by wishing you the greatest success in the exercise of your chairmanship of the Permanent Council, Mr. Chairman, during this quarter, and guarantee that you will have the full support of my delegation to be very successful for all the work this council takes on during this quarter. Also, we should like to avail ourselves of the opportunity to appreciate the speakers for the presentations we heard today from Mr. Javier Palumo, Special Rapporteur of the Rapporteurship on Economic, Social, Cultural, and Environmental Rights, RODESCA, and the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, ICHR, as well as also greet the participation of Mr. Pascual, Director of the Division of Human Rights of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Chile. Mr. Chairman, Costa Rica reaffirms its strong commitment to the promotion and protection of the human rights to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as enshrined in Resolution 76/300 of the United Nations General Assembly. My delegation also participated very heavily in getting there. This right is fundamental to preserve human dignity and the well-being of present and future generations. Climate change and environmental degradation seriously threaten the full exercise of human rights. Therefore, we welcome the work of the ICHR and in particular of Redesca highlighting its Resolution 3/21, which recognized the climate emergency as a real threat to human rights in the hemisphere. In this context, we celebrate the adoption of the Agreement on the Conservation and Sustainable Use of Marine Biological Diversity in Areas Outside of National Jurisdiction, known as BBNJ, given the acronym in English. This legally binding, ambitious, and science-based instrument represents a milestone in the protection of biodiversity on the high seas and in the strengthening of international ocean governance, contributing directly to the fulfillment of the right to a healthy environment. Costa Rica has actively participated in this negotiation process. In June 2023, we were present at the adoption of the BBNG at the United Nations headquarters. And in September of the same year, we were also one of the first countries to sign it, thus reaffirming our commitment to marine conservation and the sustainable use of ocean resources. To be more specific, we were the second country to sign it. Currently, we are moving towards its ratification with the aim of implementing effective management mechanisms, such as the creation of marine protected areas in international waters in line with the global goal of protecting 30% of the oceans by 2030. As we have heard today already, for the treaty to enter into force, at least 60 countries must complete their ratification processes. We urgently call on the international community to accelerate this process so that the treaty is in force before the third Ocean Conference to be held in Nice in June 2025, where Costa Rica will have the honor of being a co-host with France. The oceans are much more than an extension. It's the active part of the planet. It feeds culture, makes connections between peoples. The waters regulate the climate, generate oxygen, and house an invaluable biodiversity. To protect the oceans is not just an environmental action, it's an act of justice for future generations. And it is a commitment with our own humankind and to balance all of life on the earth. We reiterate our support for this issue, convinced that the OAS Secretary General, as well as the Inter-American Commission, says the Speaker, the Inter-American Council of Integral Development, and moreover, this Permanent Council must continue to play a crucial role in the promotion of a robust regional framework that guarantees the protection of the marine environment and the well-being of our societies. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor to the delegation of Brazil. Minister Thais Mesquita, you have the floor, madam. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Brazil truly appreciates the presentations from the Special Rapporteur on Economic, Social, Cultural, and Environmental Rights, Dr. Javier Palomo, and Ambassador Tomás Pascual, the Director of Human Rights from the Ministry of Chile. We truly appreciate the opportunity to deal with this issue, which is globally relevant and very germane for the hemisphere. I would like to underscore that the discussions in the Inter-American Forum on this issue do not substitute nor undermine negotiations in different fora concerning the law of the sea. The discussion in the OAS is more than welcome, providing that the focus is to promote a dialogue and a regional view on marine biodiversity. It might also be very helpful for developing tools for regional cooperation. The final document, Mr. Chairman, the countries are committed to protect health and biodiversity and marine ecosystems. And for this, it's crucial to comply with the international agreements as the Declaration of Rivers, respecting the principle of common responsibilities, although different in nature. Brazil defends international cooperation and supports the developing countries and coastal communities to strengthen their oversight given the impact of climate change. In the G20, the Declaration of Leaders convened all countries to have enter into force and implement the agreement on the Convention and Sustainable Use of Biodiversity for the Marine Environment in areas beyond jurisdictional areas, known as the BBNG. This agreement underscores the need to shore up international cooperation, improve capacities, and technical financing, particularly for the developing countries. Brazil reiterates that implementation of the BBNG agreement should be accompanied by robust financing mechanisms and transfer of technology so that all states, and particularly the developing states, can fulfill their responsibilities and also take advantage of the benefits of marine biodiversity. Finally, Mr. Chairman, within the framework of COP30, Brazil has taken on the co-chairmanship of a dialogue on climate change this year. This dialogue will be informal, and it's going to take place within the subsidiary organs that offer scientific and technological assistance within the framework of the United Nations on climate change. And we hope that there will be specific contributions so that we can make progress in this area. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Colombia has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, I would like to congratulate you for taking on the chairmanship of the Permanent Council and wish you the best of results during your term. You can have the support of our delegation. It is an honor for Colombia to take the floor to reflect on this issue of crucial importance that affects everybody, conservation and the sustainable use of marine biodiversity, particularly in the areas outside of jurisdictional waters, and to see that these efforts are directly linked to human rights, the clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. We truly appreciate the comments made by Dr. Palumo and Ambassador Thomas Pascual. The oceans that cover more than 70% of our planet are essential for our life. In Colombia, as a coastal regional company, we know what seas mean, not only for biodiversity, but also for communities that depend on it for their livelihood and their well-being. Nonetheless, a large part of marine biodiversity is outside of national areas on the high seas. These are areas that might seem far, but is vital for the balance of global ecosystems. So along that vein, then, Colombia believes that oceans, in as much as it's common heritage of all mankind, should be managed responsibly. There are serious challenges such as overfishing, pollution, and the effects of climate change not only impact marine biodiversity, but also endanger millions of people throughout the entire world, particularly the most vulnerable communities that directly depend on marine resources for their livelihood. Conservation of marine biodiversity is an issue of human rights, the right to a clean environment, one that is healthy and sustainable. This is crucial for human dignity. And clean ocean not only guarantees biodiversity, but also ensures food security, good health, well-being of all people. This right that we have recognized internationally is crucial so that we can live in harmony with nature and ensure a good future for future generations. Colombia firmly supports setting up a international legal robust framework for the protection of marine biodiversity outside of national jurisdictions. We applaud the efforts with the agreement on the conservation and the sustainable use of marine biodiversity in areas outside of the national jurisdiction areas, and we believe it's crucial for all countries to come together to implement it in an effective way. The protection of oceans requires joint efforts that goes beyond borders and which is based on international cooperation, mutual respect, and global justice. To do so and to have this, it is crucial that all of our actions are based on science, scientific evidence. This is the pillar on which we have to build our policies and make our decisions. Constant oversight and monitoring will mean that we have ecosystems and their vulnerabilities and will give us a chance to take the measures to mitigate the impact for human activities. We emphasize that benefits that come from marine resources should be fair and equitable. The most vulnerable communities, which directly depend on maritime resources for their livelihood, should be part of the decision-making framework and benefit in a proportional way to meet their needs when it comes to the conservation of ecosystems. Social justice, economic justice should be the crux of any global efforts for conservation. Colombia is fully wedded to the protection of oceans and conservation of marine biodiversity, understanding that this is not just a question of protecting the environment, but also is one of guaranteeing human rights to have a clean, healthy, sustainable environment. Oceans belong to all of us, and their well-being also implies something that affects and is part for all of us. Thank you very much. Ecuador, Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Once again, I'd like to congratulate you for taking on the chairmanship, and of course you have the total support of Ecuador, this delegation, which is honored to be in the vice chairmanship position alongside you. The delegation of Ecuador also appreciates the speakers for their presentations this morning on this topic, which is so germane. We're dealing with the conservation and the sustainable use of marine biodiversity outside of the national jurisdictions, alongside the link to human rights and a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Now, there is no shadow of a doubt that conservation and the sustainable use of marine biodiversity outside of the national jurisdictions is a very sensitive, crucial topic. It cannot be dealt with lightly. Ecuador, and I will just give you this by way of example, is well aware of this issue when it comes to the Galapagos. As many must know, since 2001, the Committee of World Heritage within the framework of UNESCO recognized it as a sole exceptional value from the ecological, cultural, economic, and human standpoint, and that is why it included it in the World Heritage Sites. And that is why, or a host of different policies have been adopted for maintenance and the conservation for the species that live there. Nonetheless, there are very serious threats on that worldwide heritage, particularly in the high seas areas that have been hit by a lot of damage. This is what we have seen very intensely in the last few years, this degradation. And this has been because intense industrial fishing in these international waters, precisely along the coast of the EEZ. And this is very significant for marine biodiversity. Now, each year we detect more than 300 ships, international ships of industrial fishing. There are capture or lights that sees these international vessels, and it's like seeing an entire city lighted up. They're precisely along the maritime coast of the Galapagos, and this has the effect of taking away things from such a sensitive area, and that is why we look at the international community for regulation of biodiversity outside of the national jurisdiction, and we trust that specific and effective decisions will be taken that safeguard us from the risks of these current threats. Now, in this spirit, we should like to draw attention and have special view not only for this World Heritage, but for biodiversity for the entire planet that has a link to human rights. Ecuador, because of that, carried out a new debt swap for conservation last year, and this is the biggest in the world so far. This means the creation of a fund of indispensable income for conservation and protection of the marine biology of Mandad and Galapagos, with marine areas that are more than 298 square kilometers of the protected area in the South Pacific. We hope that this will also have the luck of safeguarding everything away from these threats of industrial fishing fishing, which not just these vessels, but these vessels are really factories on the high seas. Now, these funds will not only be used for the conservation of marine biodiversity, but to protect the populations of the isle, as well as for the preservation of the sustainable use of marine resources, guaranteeing security for food in a biologically strategic area for the region and the world. And as such, this will be a feasible way of safeguarding human rights in these areas. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vice Chair, Ambassador Montal. I'd like to give the floor to the delegation of Chile. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Also, like the other speakers who spoke before me and other delegations who have been part of this, I would like to congratulate you for putting this on the agenda of the meeting from the mandate. This shows Brazil's commitment to fulfilling our agreements. This is the happy coincidence. This is the quarter where, in addition to other things, this council is a prep for the next General Assembly, and everything points to having our full-fledged support for you. Availing myself or taking advantage of this moment, and with everything that Chile said, we would like to share the comments and look at the protection of human rights, looking at everything that we are doing, notwithstanding, including establishment of new mandates. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. France has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And also let me congratulate you for your new chairmanship. Ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, my dear colleagues, I would also like to thank the speakers for their very informative presentation, Mr. Palomon from Redesca and Ambassador from Chile. France recognized the importance of the agreement on the conservation and the sustainable use of maritime biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, the BBNJ. This is one of the pillars of international management of oceans, which is holistic. On 5th of February, with the Secretary General of the United Nations, we ratified this agreement, and this underscores the process of ratification for the unanimous adoption by the Parliament of the bill presented by Minister of Foreign Affairs on the 5th of November 2024. This agreement, as you said, was participated in by many and evaluated by the parties to the conference. France, as other member states of the European Union, has mobilized enter into force very quickly after the third conference of the United Nations of the Oceans, UN3, which will take place in June 2025. As you all well know, France, with Costa Rica, is the co-chair of UNOC3, which will bring together lots of heads of states, as well as many representatives from civil society, universities, and other local organizations. We would like to congratulate the members of the OAS who have already moved towards ratifying this essential instrument for good governance of the oceans. And we would like to encourage all of our partners to sign and to ratify the BBNG agreement. Thus far, 21 ratifications is what we have. Mr. Chairman, this is a coordinated approach where we have a lot of different challenges. We deal with catastrophes, and that is why we have to be represented by many authorities and be wedded to the BBNG and protected marine environments. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'd like to give the floor to the Secretary General. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Muito obrigado, Ambassador Belli. Best wishes for you as chair of the Permanent Council. Now, as you know, in May, I will have to move on, and I would like to ask for an apology beforehand for that. Nonetheless, all the best. Conservation of marine biodiversity outside of national jurisdictions is linked to human rights for clean, healthy, sustainable environment that is crucial for dialogue in our world and the region. More than 3 million people depend on the oceans for their food and livelihood. Nonetheless, marine pollution increases, endangering these systems, corals, and there is the loss of species. These are signs, alarming signs of the crisis. In Latin America and the Caribbean, more than 2 million people directly or indirectly, I should say, from fishing. 27% of the population of the Americas live in coastal areas. Our region hosts 37 of the 59 ecoregions in the region, more than any other hemisphere. Climate change is increasingly a threat, especially for the small developing insular states of the Caribbean. Climate change, we are losing some of the environments. And Suriname is the country that is most hard hit. Bahamas, Guyana, and French Guyana as well. Now, given this reality, action for oceans is urgent. It's necessary to protect fundamental human rights and to make strides towards sustainable life. We have various instruments to do this, such as the ones that were mentioned here, like the resolution of the 22 in the United Nations for a Clean Environment and the Agreement of 2023 on marine biodiversity that is to say, the BBNJ. Both promote international cooperation and participation of local communities and indigenous communities as well. In 2023, the Secretary General took on the Coalition of 2030 Action for Oceans through a view of technical assistance for protection of waters of our member states. We promoted looking at SADGAS and looking at the impact with the support of funds for the world environment and the participation of Colombia, Dominican Republic, Grenada, Jamaica, Panama, St. Lucia, Trinidad, and Tobago. We made strides in this area to implement solutions for management of waters in the Caribbean with the support of Barbados, Honduras, Trinidad and Tobago, and Honduras. Our commitment is very active. We promote solutions that make up governance, science, conservation, investment, and citizens' participation for the service of our member states. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. As I don't have any other requests for the floor, we'd like to thank the various speakers for their comments, as well as delegations for their own remarks. I also truly appreciate the representative of Chile for their commitment and cooperation for complying with this mandate. The chair would like to suggest that the Permanent Council take due note of the remarks and presentations made, which will be in the minutes of this meeting, and as such then will fulfill 38 mandate, which the General Assembly be duly informed for its next set of meetings. As there are no objections to this, it is so agreed.
For consideration of the next item on the order of business, I would like to give the floor to the delegation of Panama to present the draft resolution commemorating the bicentennial of the Anfictyonic Congress of Panama, CP 6073-25. I give you the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much. Our delegation is pleased to present the draft resolution commemoration of the bicentennial of the Anfictyonico Congress of Panama. And we confirm that we are able to work together for approval at the upcoming GIE. As you all know, one of the priorities of our government, led by His Excellency the President Mulino Quintero, is commemorating the bicentennial of the Anfictyonic Congress. This is a story that began multilateralism in the region and is known as a precursor to the Inter-American System and the OAS. The Anfictyonic Congress in Panama, convened by Simón Bolívar, built a space for dialogue, cooperation, and regional integration, and it continues to be relevant in our organization with peace, sovereignty, equality among states, and seeking shared solutions to our challenges as a hemisphere. We have offered to be the site of the 56th regular period of sessions of the OAS in 2026, as well as various meetings within the Inter-American System. We hope that this is a platform to reflect on the importance of strengthening our institutionality in the inter-American space. Since the chairmanship of 1976, when the GA adopted resolution with the sesquicentennial of the Amphitryon Congress, translated into the 4 official languages of the OAS, we propose that 2026 be declared the year to commemorate the bicentennial of the Amphitryon Congress in Panama. In addition, we urge member states to join this commemoration through academic, cultural, and diplomatic initiatives to highlight the cross-cutting nature of this event in the history of hemispheric cooperation. In that sense, we invite delegations to support the initiative and to co-sponsor the draft resolution, which is proposed for approval by the OAS-GA at its 55th regular period of sessions to be held in Antigua and Barbuda in June of this year. We ask you to send your comments on the text by April 18th at the latest, and we have so far received proposals from Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico, to whom we reiterate our thanks for their support. If some observations cannot be resolved bilaterally, we will be convening a negotiating meeting with the purpose of building consensus on the text. The objective is to reach an agreement before negotiations begin on the draft resolutions in the framework of the commissions. We reiterate our openness to receiving your feedback and working hand in hand to commemorate this bicentennial, which represents the history of integration and multilateralism in the Americas. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado, embaixador.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your presentation. And now I give the floor to delegations who would like to intervene on this item in today's order of business. And I'll give the floor first to Haiti. Chair. Please allow me to congratulate you for your chairmanship at the Permanent Council of the OAS for this period from April to June 2025. You can be assured of my delegation's full support for achieving success in your work, and my delegation would also like to thank you for including on the order of business in today's regular session this item on commemorating the bicentennial of the Amphitryon Congress in Panama. Also, thank you to the Permanent Mission of Panama for this very important initiative, and I have taken due note of the resolution, which is a pioneering effort in establishing a framework for cooperation and dialogue between nations of this hemisphere. Following the Congress in Panama held in Panama City from June 22nd to July 15th, 1826, Simón Bolívar not only brought together countries of Latin America to create a unifying policy with regard to Spain, but he also envisioned a united America able to protect its new independent republics. And it led to the adoption of a League of Republics of the Americas, the Pact of Mutual Defense, and a supranational parliament. And the League and Confederation created during that conference led parties to mutually defend one another and peacefully resolve any differences. And even if the treaty never entered into force, it is important as it built a precedent for international conferences for states in the Americas, notably those in Washington in October 1949 and April 1989, which led to the creation of the OAS in 1948, and of which Haiti is one of the founding members. We are talking about the history to remind you that Haiti played a considerable role in the process of independence in Hispanic America, particularly through Gran Colombia, and that led to Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, and Venezuela as independent nations. And also, we saw their quest for assistance in the anti-colonial fight. And in New York, Samuel Ogden, who traded with Haiti, and American traders, Thomas Lewis, who had good relations with the president of Haiti, Alexander Pétion, sought help from Haiti in order to allow them to benefit from the generosity of Haitian leaders. And this substantial assistance for Miranda's quest to liberate Gran Colombia from Spanish colonialism was the result. And Simón Bolívar went to Haiti, where he was hosted by Alexandre Pétion and promised any help he needed. And this was crucial for Gran Colombia's liberation. We showed our solidarity and once again opened our arms, providing medical assistance to the fighters and provided them with important weapons, money, printing presses, and even volunteers. This allowed the liberator to achieve his goal, and otherwise the history of Latin America would have been very different. It is commensurate for historic reasons, and Simón Bolívar chose not to invite Haiti to the Congress in Panama, and he was afraid that this would be a handicap for his project in achieving approval from European countries and countries in the Americas that still had slavery. The Congress was pioneering and unique in Panama. In 2026, this commemoration should not only be recognizing the heritage and legacy of Simón Bolívar and the history of inter-American cooperation, the precursors that led to the OAS. It should also, and above all, be a year to commemorate solidarity, of which Haiti is exemplary. Our assistance allowed Bolívar to triumph and continued to drive member states and permanent observers of the OAS, as this vision allowed us to ensure security, promote economic growth, strengthen the rule of law and justice, and protect democracy in all countries of our region. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Costa Rica, please. Thank you very much, Chair, permanent representatives, Secretary General, delegates, greetings to all. Costa Rica would like to greet and thank you for the cross-cutting nature of this event in Panama and the Congress convened by Bolivar 200 years ago. And that is where the visionaries in 1826 met to truly build a space for dialogue, cooperation, and working in concert among the nascent republics of the Americas. The Congress in Panama was not only an act of faith in the unity of our people, it was also the cement of a multilateral architecture expressed today with renewed vigor in organizations such as the OAS. The ideals that begat that effort, self-determination, peace, sovereignty, solidarity, continue to guide our collective efforts within the inter-American system. Costa Rica staunchly believes in the value of diplomacy, international law, and multilateralism as fundamental tools for peace, security, and sustainable development, and we reiterate our commitment to those founding principles. We thank and congratulate the brotherly people of Panama for this commemorating resolution, which not only recognizes our shared history, but rather calls on us to renew our spirit of cooperation, integration, and freedom, which today is still alive in the Congress from Panama. We wish you most success in negotiating this resolution to declare 2026 as the year to commemorate the bicentennial of the Amphitryon Congress in Panama. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time I'm taking the floor during the period where Brazil is the chair, we express our support and wish you most success. The Paraguayan delegation congratulates the distinguished mission of Panama for the draft resolution regarding commemoration of the bicentennial of the Amphitryon Congress held in Panama City in 1826. despite the fact that Paraguay did not take part in that Congress, as at the time the governor expressed at the time to the governor of Gran Colombia, Simon Bolivar, that neutrality established by Paraguay was a way to ensure its independence and security. And therefore, we must note the cross-cutting nature of that Congress as the first step toward Pan-Americanism in the history of our hemisphere. That is why we greatly value the initiative from the Panamanian delegation, and we urge you to build consensus on this document to celebrate the last 200 years. Thank you very much.
Passo a palavra à delegação.
Mexico, please. Ambassador. Thank you, Chair. My delegation salutes and co-sponsors the draft resolution presented by the Distinguished Permanent Mission of Panama, commemoration of the bicentennial of the Amphitryon Congress, as this will be considered at the 55th regular period of sessions of the OAS-GA. After almost 200 years since this meeting convened by Liberator Simon Bolivar, which led to the Amphitryon Congress, was a milestone for American unity and multilateral diplomacy in our hemisphere. It brought together the principles of peace, sovereignty, cooperation, and equality among states, which continue to be highly relevant. And with this co-sponsorship, we reiterate our commitment to multilateralism, dialogue, and cooperation as indispensable tools for strengthening regional integration, reminding you all that the meetings in the Amphitryon Congress continued in August 1826 in what was at the time the outskirts of Mexico City, and led to continuing conversations on the regional integration project, which has characterized Mexico's international relations as a peaceful nation that prioritizes dialogue, understanding, and good faith in our international relations, and which strongly is attached to a rules-based international order. Thank you very much. Thank you, and I'll give the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Chair. And at the risk of going over time and being wrung out, I will take a moment to congratulate you for your new position and assure you that my delegation looks forward to working with you in the 3 months ahead. Colleagues, the United States is happy to join consensus in adopting today's resolution. We thank the government of Panama for its leadership in ensuring that we as a hemisphere recognize the 200th anniversary of the historic Congress of Panama. This bicentennial is not simply a commemoration of the past, it is an opportunity to reflect on the enduring promise of effective and meaningful cooperation among the independent nations of the Americas. Convened by Simón Bolívar in 1826, the Congress was a bold and visionary attempt to create a multilateral framework for collective security, dialogue, and solidarity in the Western Hemisphere. And while its institutional goals were ambitious and ultimately unrealized, its spirit endures. In this council, in this organization, in the upcoming 10th Summit of the Americas, and in our shared commitment to freedom, sovereignty, and mutual respect. The United States has long recognized the significance of this moment. Former Secretary of State Henry Clay, regarded in our country as the father of Pan-Americanism, and whose bust is just outside this hall, Henry Clay advocated for U.S. participation in the Panama Congress. Speaking to our Congress that year, he declared, and I quote, "It is a glorious spectacle to behold those nations which have so recently emerged from colonial subjugation, assembling together to deliberate upon their common interests and their mutual security." Now, although one of the United States appointed delegates passed away en route to the Congress, and the other arrived too late to fully participate, the gesture of U.S. engagement and the desire of my government to participate signaled the beginning of a hemispheric tradition that would grow stronger over time, from the first International Conference of American States in 1889 to the creation of the Pan American Union in 1910, and eventually the founding of this organization where we are proud to serve today. Chair, as Secretary Rubio emphasized, following the recent election of incoming Secretary General Ramdin, the United States remains committed to the core mission of the OAS, defending democracy, protecting human rights, and advancing security and economic prosperity throughout the Americas. These priorities are not new. They are grounded in the same aspirations that Simón Bolívar expressed in 1826 and which continue to resonate with renewed urgency in our own hemisphere. This commemoration also comes at a significant moment for my country. Also next year, in 2026, we will celebrate our semi-quincentennial, to our friends upstairs, our semi-quincentennial, our 250th anniversary. It is not lost on us that these two milestones, the Congress of Panama and the founding of the United States, occurred within the same revolutionary generation, shaped by the same shared ideals of independence, republicanism, and self-determination. The OAS played a meaningful role in marking our bicentennial 50 years ago through a resolution at the OAS General Assembly held in Atlanta, Georgia in 1974, and through the founding in 1976 of the Art Museum of the Americas. Next year, we look forward to working again with the OAS to celebrate our anniversary with the same spirit of unity and hemispheric cooperation. Chair, in some parts of our hemisphere, the values of this organization and the values of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, free and fair elections, civic freedoms, and the importance of democratic institutions, these values are under threat, most notably in Cuba, in Nicaragua, and in Venezuela, where authoritarian regimes stand in stark contradiction to the ideals of liberty and republican self-government that Bolívar himself envisioned. Indeed, to invoke Bolívar's name in defense of such repressive systems is to fundamentally distort the legacy of a man who called for unity, justice, and accountable government in the Americas. In closing, the road from Panama to Washington, from 1826 to 2026, has been long and at times difficult, but the journey continues. We reaffirm today our commitment to building a more secure, more democratic, and more prosperous hemisphere based on respect for sovereignty, liberty, and the enduring promise of the Americas. Thank you.
Passo a palavra à delegação do Brasil.
Brazil is recognized. Thank you, Chair. I would like to first of all thank Panama for the initiative of presenting this draft resolution to the GA in commemoration of the bicentennial of the Amphitronic Congress. This, as we know, is not just the beginning of the efforts that led to the first Pan American Conference. It was also a pioneering initiative, and it anticipated the principles of international law, which would only be recognized much later. Unlike major agreements that led to the international system, which were interventionary in nature, the Pan American Conference was among equals to build instruments of peace, and the topic of the Congress was particularly dear to Brazil, as it was very unique. And having taken part in the encounter, the Brazilian representative said that this was the last body of the surviving documents from the Congress, and we have been working to verbalize the draft agreement of cooperation between the Brazil, Panama, and the Amphitronic Congress to conserve the articles of this Congress. And thus, Chair, we greatly value the initiative, and we congratulate Panama for running the consultation process openly, transparently, and with inclusion, receiving comments. And we are very pleased with the draft resolution sent for consideration. Thank you very much. Honduras, please, Ambassador. Chair, I would just like to congratulate you for assuming the chairmanship today of the OAS Permanent Council, and also to congratulate the Ambassador of Panama for this draft resolution commemoration of the bicentennial of the Amphitronic Congress of Panama on Liberator Simón Bolívar. Thank you very much. Secretary General. Thank you, Chair. I love the sound of this bell so much I'm going to read this as slowly as possible just so I can hear it ring. The Congress should remind us, and this, as we know from the draft resolution presented today, is the first step toward the creation of our organization, and it was originally conceived as the Congress of Panama, and then it was called the Amphitronic Congress to pay tribute to the Amphitronic meeting in ancient Greece to come together to defend a common good. And Chair, it's worth quoting Simón Bolívar as a visionary when convening the conference, and when after 200 years we seek the origin of our international public law and we look at the agreements that led to its creation, the protocols from the Isthmus, and which led to the very first partnerships to build our international cooperation. And we look at the resolution presented, and it was to rebuild peace and solidarity, strengthen our independence, and promote the social and economic rights of the new countries of our continent. In 1826, there was this idea of the various perspectives of the region, and the seeds were sown for a confederation, which, though it was not ratified later on, it would be determining in the creation of the Pan American Union and later on our own organization. And it is only just that we pay tribute to those who sowed those seeds 200 years ago. Thank you very much, Chair. If there are no further requests for the floor, I suggest that we take note of the presentation from Panama, and we invite other member states to hold consultations so as to agree on this draft resolution. And if there are no further objections, it is so agreed. The next item on the order of business today is a presentation from the rapporteur of the chair of the Style Committee for the 54th regular period of sessions of the GA, distributed as document CP Doc 607525. And for that purpose, I'm pleased to give the floor to the chair of the commission, the alternate representative of Colombia, Mr. Nicolas Higuera Gonzalez. Mr. Higuera, I give you the floor. Thank you, Chair. The delegation of Colombia, as chair of the Style Committee of the 55th regular period of sessions of the GA, presents to the Permanent Council the report on the work carried out by the committee in compliance with Article 28 of the Rules of Procedure of the GA and the mandate from the Permanent Council from the regular session on October 26. The full report was distributed in a timely fashion by the Secretariat as CP Doc 607525. By decision of this council, the committee was comprised by the delegations of the Bahamas for English, Brazil for Portuguese, Canada for French, and Colombia for Spanish. To fulfill its mandate, the committee received the resolution, the program budget for the organization for 2025, adopted during the 55th regular period of special period of sessions of the GA, with the aim of correcting any issues with form and ensuring agreement between the text and the official languages of the organization. To that end, on January 27th last, we held a meeting open to participation from all member states, in which, with support from the translators team from the Department of Conferences Management and meetings from the Assistant Secretary General's office and assistance from the Secretariat of the Permanent Council, we focused on correcting any errors identified and ensuring agreement between the text and all official languages of the organization. Following that review, we did not find any defects in the form which require consideration by the Permanent Council, and the revised text was published for consideration on March 17th in the official languages as document AG Res 1 LVE/24 Rev 1. Upon concluding the task, on behalf of my delegation, I'd like to express my gratitude to the distinguished delegations of Bahamas, Brazil, and Canada, and all member states that actively participated in the work of the committee. Also, thank you very much to the translator team and the staff from the Permanent Council Secretariat, whose support was sine qua non to fulfilling that mandate. And with conclusion of its work at the committee, we present the report for consideration by the Permanent Council. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Higuera, for your presentation. And I'd like to give the floor to any delegations that would like to speak with regard to the report presented. The Bahamas is recognized.
Thank you, Chair. At the outset, my delegation wishes to congratulate you on your chairmanship and wish you all the best during your tenure. My delegation wishes to convey its gratitude to the chair of the Style Committee of the 55th Special Session of the General Assembly, Colombia. We further wish to thank the delegations of Canada and Brazil for their collaborative spirit during this process. And lastly, we wish to extend our utmost appreciation to the Secretariat for their unwavering assistance and guidance during the process. My delegation wishes to note that during the meetings of the Style Committee, interpretation was not facilitated as the budgetary appropriations were not made to permit this. We understand that this has been the practice in previous iterations of the Style Committee, and we further wish to note that the difficulties of ensuring uniformity among the 4 official languages of the OAS without interpretation. My delegation notes that in accordance with the provisions of Article 28 of the Rules and Procedure of the General Assembly, and I quote, "The Style Committee shall receive the resolutions, declarations, and recommendations issued by the General Assembly, shall correct their defects of form, and shall ensure equivalency among the versions in the official languages." With this in mind, my delegation wishes to propose that the requisite sums be appropriated in the forthcoming and future budgets of the organization. We believe that this process necessitates interpretation in the 4 OAS official languages for the Style Committee to ensure accuracy of the documents. We look forward to further raising this matter at the CAP for consideration in the forthcoming budget negotiations. Thank you, Chair.
Obrigado.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we have no further requests for the floor, I suggest that the Permanent Council take due note of the report from the Style Committee at the 54th regular session of the General Assembly in document CP Doc 6075/25, expressing its gratitude to the delegations that participated in the activities of this committee. As there are no objections, it is so agreed. Our next item on the agenda, I should like to submit for the consideration of the Permanent Council the proposal guidelines for the presentation of candidates for the position of Assistant Secretary General of the Organization of American States. I have an overview for the special meeting of the Permanent Council scheduled for the next April 7th, 10 a.m. in the first meeting on this resolution. The proposal was distributed in the official language on March 26 as document CP Doc 6078/25 and is based on the guidelines approved by the Permanent Council of February 5th, 2025 for the presentation of 2 candidates for the position of Secretary General, which is in document CP Doc 6057/25 Rev 1. Considering that this proposal is based on previously approved guidelines, and since there were no observations received, the chair understands that it could be approved by consensus. I should like to consult delegations if we can proceed with approval. As there are no requests for the floor, the guidelines for the presentation of candidates for the position of Assistant Secretary General of the Organization of American States is approved. As this at this point, only one candidate for the position of Assistant Secretary General is received. It will not be necessary to proceed to a draw, as we had it scheduled in the agenda for today, to determine the order of intervention in the special session of the Permanent Council of April 7th. Moving on, looking at the invitations to the 57th special session of the General Assembly. This requires an authorization of the Permanent Council in keeping with the provisions in Articles 9, indent C, and D, and 10 of the regulations of the General Assembly. In this regard, then, and based on the reports presented by the General Secretariat, I should like to consult the Permanent Council if we can proceed in the first instance for the approval of the draft resolution, I should say, invitations to the 57th regular meeting of the General Assembly, which requires authorization of the Permanent Council, and which was distributed to all delegations on the 26th of March as document CP Doc 6076/25. I see no objections. Approved. In the same vein, then, I should like to consult the Permanent Council if we can proceed to approve the draft resolution. Invitations of civil society organizations, or two, I should say, civil society organizations registered for the Organization of American Saints to the 57th Special Meeting of General Assemblies in document CP Doc 6077/25, circulated to all delegations also on the 26th of March. I see no objections. Approved. For the consideration of the next item on our order of day or on our agenda, I turn to the permanent representative of Chile, Ambassador Sebastian Kraljevic, Chair of the Committee on Administrative and Budget Affairs, to present us the results of the consultations entrusted to the CAP regarding the request of the Council of Delegates of the Inter-American Defense Board to the Permanent Council on the situation of the Casa del Soldado. Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, yes, in point of fact, the chair of the Permanent Council conveyed to the CAP the request to carry out consultations with regards to the resolution of the Council of Delegates of the Inter-American Defense Board, in which it requested this Permanent Council to take a position on the sale of the Casa del Soldado in 6 months. Before, as was circulated to all members on the 24th of January, this year, the leadership of the Inter-American Defense Board sent a note that was circulated CP/CAP 4039/25, in which the study commission made up of this point. Members of the board needed a month to conduct or fulfill their work. Now, bearing in mind this background and other important points that are part of the General Assembly's mandate and part of the strategy for the long-term real estate management approved in the CAP on the 26th of March, the CAP agreed in its meeting yesterday, 1st of April, on the following, and I'm going to quote the agreement taken by CAP. The CAP recommends to the Permanent Council to postpone up until the 2nd of May 2025 the deadline mandated in AG Res 1 of the special meeting number 2424, paragraph 4, 18C. This provides a possibility for the Permanent Council of the OAS to analyze the report that could be presented to the Council of Delegates of the Inter-American Defense Board, and that it has an alternative approach that could provide a financial benefit equal to or greater for the OAS, given the strategy for real estate in the long run. Document CP/CAP/404425 Rev 2. If there's an alternative identified, the General Secretariat and the board will present to the Permanent Council and will include identification of the financing or funding sources to implement the repairs and the maintenance necessary and established for real estate in the long run, as put to the OAS. If this report is not received by the date, or if the proposal of the Council of Delegates of the Inter-American Defense Board doesn't have any alternative that could provide a financial benefit the same as or greater for the OAS, the General Secretariat will proceed to ask for a program from the program budget and will inform on the possible sale during the next meeting. End of quote. Now, with this, there's the recommendation from the CAP to the Permanent Council as read. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador Kraljevic. Thank you very much for your presentation. Through you, I should like to thank the members of the CAP for their diligence in carrying out their work with which it was entrusted. The chair suggests that the Permanent Council takes on the recommendations in the report of the chair of the CAP and that the chair of the Council of Delegates of the IDB be informed thereof. As there are no objections, so it is agreed. Agreed. We conclude, or have included our agenda for this meeting, but before giving the floor to delegations that might wish to refer to points under other business, I am happy to inform you that the organization's program budget for 2026, presented by the General Secretariat, was distributed on March 27th as document CP/doc 6084/25 and has been immediately forwarded to the Committee on Administrative and Budget Affairs for consideration and review by member states. That's the CAP. In addition to that, on March 20th, document CP/INF 10508/25 was distributed with a note from the Director of the Department of International Law, which forwarded a report and 2 resolutions approved by the Inter-American Juridical Committee in its last regular session held at its quarters in Rio de Janeiro. These documents will be sent to the CAJP for consideration of member states. Likewise, at the request of the Secretariat of Relations with Civil Society of the Secretariat of Access to Rights and Equity, the delegations were invited to participate as observers in the meeting between the candidate for the position of Assistant Secretary General and representatives of civil society organizations registered in the OAS, which will be held next week, April 8th at 10 a.m. in the Hall of the Americas in compliance with Mandate Resolution 1269 of this Permanent Council. The Relations section with Civil Society is sharing more details about this event through its site on the organization's website. Having said that, I would like to give the floor to delegations who might like to wish to other matters of an informative nature. United States has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. With your permission, I'd like to briefly raise a few items under other business. First, as you kindly acknowledged at the beginning of the meeting, we would also like to acknowledge the recent passing of Professor Tom Ferrer, who died on March 3rd. Professor Ferrer was a distinguished academic and public servant. He served as Dean and Professor of the Joseph Corbel School of International Studies at the University of Denver, and previously as a member and also as President of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Chair, our firm commitment to strengthening the Inter-American human rights system continues, as reflected in our nomination of a candidate last week for the upcoming June elections for the Commission. We are honored to have nominated Rosa Maria Payá, a well-known advocate for democratic governance and human rights throughout the Americas, to stand for election. In this spirit, we are also pleased to invite all delegations to a reception and a special concert here at the OAS headquarters next Thursday, April 10th, beginning at 3:30 p.m. The theme is From War to Peace, honoring the legacy of inter-American solidarity. Information is being distributed to all member states now. And the event will recognize the 80th anniversaries of the Act of Chapultepec and the end of World War II. It will feature a performance by the U.S. Army Blues Band, the premier jazz ensemble of Pershing's Own, in collaboration with the Blues Alley Youth Jazz Orchestra. These are the same groups that performed here last spring. Those of you who were here for that concert know it is not to be missed, and those of you who did miss it last year, don't miss it this year. Chair, this event will honor the historic role that the Americas played in advancing peace, democracy, and collective security in the post-war era, principles that later helped shape the foundations of today's regional human rights system. The anniversaries invite us to reflect on how the principles forged in 1945, collective security, solidarity, and respect for human dignity, laid the groundwork for today's OAS and our shared commitment to uphold democracy and defend human rights. And our candidate for the Commission will be present and able to engage with delegations next week at the event. We hope the occasion will be both enjoyable and also a meaningful opportunity for reflection and dialogue on the future of our shared system and values. Thank you, Chair.
Delegação da Espanha.
Thank you very much. Spain has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is the very first time that I'm taking the floor during your chairmanship, given that I'd like to congratulate you for taking on this position and offer the necessary cooperation from this mission to the OAS. I wanted to take the floor to point out that April has just begun, in which we are commemorating the Day of the Spanish Language on the 23rd, and for that reason, we are offering a circle of the language, which began yesterday with a wonderful film from Ecuador, which was very successful, and which will continue next Thursday with another Spanish movie, as you all well know, in the auditorium of Colombia. This will continue up until the 23rd with a last Colombian film, and I should like to invite all of you, those who might want to participate and who would like to enjoy the offering. Thank you very much. As there are no further requests for the floor, I'd like to thank everyone for their participation. The meeting is hereby adjourned.